Warmer day tomorrow across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures in Edinburgh and Belfast up to 20 Celsius perhaps. We are looking at those showers, though, further south, importing them from France, heading steadily northwards, and we'll see a few more of them, I suspect, by Thursday evening. A sign of things to come as high pressure is replaced by not one but two areas of low pressure. These two are going to combine to bring a much wetter spell through Friday and the weekend.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me. Noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan. For the next hour, we're talking food prices, which have risen sharply over recent months and are set to rise even more. How high could food prices go, and what can you do to save cash? Plus, we'll be talking to one of the UK's leading pub chain bosses about how to save our beloved locals as energy costs spiral. On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News.
In a break from royal tradition, the Queen won't return to London to meet with the newly elected Prime Minister Boris Johnson next week. Instead, Mr Johnson will travel to Balmoral in Aberdeenshire for their final meeting with him in the post. Well, the announcement from Buckingham Palace comes during the final few days of campaigning in the Conservative leadership race to replace Boris Johnson. It's, of course, between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. Well, Boris Johnson's warning the Kremlin is intent on undoing the good of Mikhail Gorbachev as he paid tribute to the former Soviet leader. The US President Joe Biden's among a number of world leaders who've praised Mr Gorbachev's legacy following his death at the age of 91. He's widely recognised for his role in bringing an end to the Cold War. Today, Mr Johnson accused Vladimir Putin of attempting to recreate the Soviet Union.
Mikhail Gorbachev is one of those people who triggered a series of changes that perhaps he didn't anticipate. Maybe he paid his own political price for it. But when history is written, he will be, I think, one of the authors of fantastic change for the better in the world. And what I worry about today is that the current leadership in Moscow is intent on undoing the good that Mikhail Gorbachev did.
The government has set out plans to sell £1.5 billion worth of its offices as part of a new property strategy. The aim is to move public sector workers into fewer buildings over the next 3 years. The Brexit Minister, Jacob Rees-Mogg, says Whitehall's cutting public costs so money can be returned to the taxpayer. The government also says it's aiming to save £500 million by using different energy sources. New figures show food is rising at its fastest rate since the financial crisis in 2008. The British Retail Consortium say the annual increase in fresh food prices jumped to 10.5%, up from 8% in July. It's products like milk and margarine that are going up the highest. Well, the consortium says the war in Ukraine is continuing to put pressure on prices. Royal Mail workers are striking again today in an ongoing dispute over pay, with further industrial action planned. The Communication Workers Union says more than 100,000 members are involved, making it the biggest strike of the summer. The action follows a walkout last week in protest at a 2% pay rise, although the company says more money is on offer. Further strikes are planned for Thursday the 8th and Friday the 9th of September. Rail companies have announced further strikes for the end of September. The TSSA union says staff at 9 train companies, as well as Network Rail, will walk out from midday on Monday the 26th to midday on the Tuesday the 27th of September. There have already been several days of industrial action over the summer as thousands of transport staff walk out over pay and conditions. A team of inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog are leaving Ukraine's capital, and they're travelling to the now Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia power plant. The International Atomic Energy Agency are going to inspect the plant for damage after weeks of shelling nearby raised fears of a radiation accident. Well, the team say they're hoping to stabilise the situation. The United States is urging for a complete shutdown of the plant, and they're calling for a demilitarised zone around it. The agency inspecting it said it was a complex operation.
You know, these operations are very complex operations. We are going to a war zone. We are going to occupy territory, and this requires the explicit guarantees from not only from the Russian Federation, also from the Republic of Ukraine, and we have been able to secure that.
The cooperative group is going to sell its chain of petrol stations to Asda in a deal worth £600 million. The sale will result in 5% of Co-op's entire estate, including 129 petrol forecourts, handed over to Asda. Around 2,300 Co-op staff will also be transferred over once the deal is complete. NASA will make a second attempt at launching a rocket to the moon this weekend after the first takeoff was postponed. The Artemis 1 flight mission had been due to launch from Florida's Kennedy Space Center on Monday this week, but it was called off over technical issues. Well, the flight is now set to blast off from Cape Canaveral on Saturday afternoon in a 6-week test flight around the moon and back. But with a 40% chance of favourable weather, the operation may yet again be clouded with issues. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for today's On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, UK food prices are rising at their fastest pace in 14 years, amid spiralling costs for fertiliser, animal feedstock and fuel. But with many food retailers still absorbing those cost increases, are food shopping bills set to rise even more as firms struggle to survive? And what can you do to save cash when you're shopping for food? Plus, Royal Mail workers are on strike again with over 100,000 staff staging a 4-day walkout amid ongoing disputes over pay. We'll be hearing from the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. And as travel chaos rumbles on with cancelled flights and long wait times, more Brits have been holidaying at home despite sky-high petrol costs. We hear from the boss of a leading car rental platform. And each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we meet Chris Jowsey of Admiral Taverns pub chain. Running over 1,600 pubs across Britain, he'll be discussing why our beloved locals are in danger as their energy bills spiral. That's later in the show. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On The Money? How do they impact you? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On The Money. Now, the cost of living soaring, not least due to sky-high energy costs. The new Ofgem energy price cap announced last Friday means that from October, the typical household energy bill will spiral to around £3,500. That's up almost threefold in less than a year. It's not just fuel, though, because food prices are rising quickly too. And today, the extent of those rises was laid bare in an important new survey by the British Retail Consortium. During the year to July, food prices rose 8% on average. The pace of price increase then went up to 10.5% last month, according to the British Retail Consortium survey. That's the fastest increase in food prices since the financial crisis back in 2008. Now, the BRC points to the impact, of course, of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on the price of animal feed, fertiliser, wheat, vegetable oils. That's pushed up all food prices, particularly for milk, eggs, meat and margarine. The British Retail Consortium says the outlook's bleak for both consumers and retailers. But businesses, they say, will support people through discounts to vulnerable groups, expanding value ranges, fixing price of essentials and raising staff pay. Now, the reality is that even before Russia invaded Ukraine 6 months ago last week, UK inflation was already at a 30-year high. These food price rises, which also reflect the ongoing logistical chaos caused by lockdown, have been a long time coming. Now, across some sectors, it strikes me, like petrol retailing, professional services or airport parking, for instance, some businesses, are using this inflationary environment to hike prices far more than is justified to unfairly boost their profits. But it strikes me that food retailers, in contrast, they're actually absorbing a large part of the increase in their costs, not yet fully passing them on to consumers. Why? Because our food retailing sector is broadly competitive, with the big supermarkets not wanting their rivals to gain market share. If this Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, though, I'd say food retailers will eventually be forced to pass on more of their costs, and food price inflation for shoppers could easily go higher still. And that's our On The Money question today. Are food prices set to rise even more? Here on The Money, we have grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff. And today my panel consists of Mark Summers, a beef and arable farmer in Buckinghamshire, returning to On The Money. Great to have you with us. Mark, from the cab of your tractor again. Vicky Price, friend of the show, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research, joins us. And in the studio, it's Justin Urquhart-Stewart. We can't get rid of him. On The Money's very own answer to Gordon Gekko, co-founder of Regionally. Great to have you with us. Mark, let's go to you first. You're a beef and arable farmer, as I said. I know that a lot of farmers feel that the supermarkets give them a hard time squeezing your margins to protect theirs. But it strikes me that the supermarket sector is also pretty competitive. And if food prices are up 10% during the year to August, as the British Retail Consortium says, it strikes me that farmers' costs have gone up even more.
Yeah, farmers' costs have increased massively in the last 12 months. The price of fertilizer has probably gone up 300%. The cost of fuel has gone up probably 30%. And then you've energy increase, costs and energy increases as well, which are really kind of crippling the whole situation. The farmers are always pretty much at the mercy of the supermarkets because they're limited in their market. So they don't have anyone else to sell to, well, not on a large scale.
Broadly speaking, Mark, I don't want to upset your business. You will have relationship with food purchasing organisations and so on. But in general, Mark, do farmers feel that they're being squeezed by the supermarkets at the moment?
Yeah, I feel they are really, because again, they dictate the price. It's not necessarily supply and demand. It's like there's only one outlet for it. You have smaller outlets like farmers markets and things like that, but in terms of scale, that's a very small percentage of the total product basically that we're producing.
So how do you feel, Mark, in the round when you read that food prices in the shops are up, in quotes, only by 10%, given that your costs are up by far more than 10%?
It kind of makes you wonder, how does it all stack up, and where is this going? Like, the cost of labour here is going to, obviously, as the cost of food and things go up, the cost of living goes up, so then the cost of labour goes up, which in turn, our cost of production increases. So it's spiralling and spiralling and spiralling, but what we're getting isn't rising at the same percentage as everything else. But even what they're charging in the supermarket is a lot more than the percentage increase that you're getting for your product on farm. So you look at the cost of wheat, for instance, it was about £180 a tonne roughly last year. It's not quite £250 a tonne at the minute. So you look at the percentage increase of that compared to the inputs involved, it doesn't match. There's nothing close.
A lot of supply chain economics going on here, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. We've heard from Mark there. He's a farmer actually producing the food. Their costs have gone up 20, 30, 40%, even more. Fertiliser prices, quadrupled at one point for many farmers.
Well, you can't even get fertiliser.
Indeed. And yet food prices, I mean, I hesitate to say they're only up 10% over the last year, because, of course, if you're a hard-pressed shopper, 10% is a big increase in your food bill, particularly for lower-income households. But it strikes me there's a lot more supply inflation in the supply chain, as we just heard from Mark, even if for now the supermarkets, they may be squeezing the farmers, but they're not yet squeezing customers, are they?
No, I mean, it's interesting. You hit the nail on the head. Where we're different from many other areas, we've got that competition.
Yeah.
And there has been cutthroat competition with the supermarkets. Then you get the discounters coming in as well, and that frightened the living daylights.
Aldi and Lidl have taken big market share off particularly Tesco, Sainsbury's and Waitrose, the more mid and up market.
And if they reckon they can they protect themselves, the likes of Waitrose, top market, actually they're all having to say, hang on, middle class is being hit here, we're having to fight back. So, yeah, actually they've been able to squeeze it. But there is more, unfortunately, inflation to come. Look at the pound. Pound's gone down. We aren't producing as much food as we used to. So, therefore, more of this comes in. Then, of course, add to that...
Those imports get more expensive because the pound is weaker.
Precisely. And then we've actually got then the issue of the weather as well. We know how much some all around Europe being affected in different ways. So I'm afraid you're actually going to find more of these supply issues are not measurable at the moment. All you can say is they will be more expensive.
Yeah. Talking of the weather, let's bring in Vicky Price. Vicky, great to have you on the show, albeit from Greece, your beloved native country of Greece. Now, I know you and the good folk at the Centre for Economic and Business Research, where you are the chief economist, have done some quite serious work, haven't you, looking at droughts across Europe, which Justin just mentioned, looking at the impact of that on food prices going forward. What are your findings, Vicky Price?
Well, it's absolutely true that the drought has made a difference and will be making a difference, because although we might survive with those types of increases in food prices for 2022, obviously there'll be a little bit more coming later in the year. What is the real worry is what's going to happen in 2023, because quite a lot of the crops that would have been, if you like, anticipated to, come into, our pockets, if you like, in the sense of being used by consumers in the future. So something that we could at least be able to pay for in supermarkets because they would be there. We won't be able to find them because the drought will have impacted on their availability very significantly. And the real worry is that when you look at what we may have to pay in 2023, and our estimates suggest that certainly by the end of 2023, the bill is going to be going up very significantly. It will be going up by year on year. Monthly, we reckon, around £37 a month extra from where we will be at the end of 2022 for the average bill that people will have to pay at the supermarket tills. So that's a big issue. So although we may be seeing inflation coming under some sort of control, maybe energy prices will stabilise. The real worry is that food prices, because of all the impacts that we have had so far, will remain high and will remain high for some time to come.
We've been predicting this for a long time here on this show, Mark Summers. Even if energy prices do come off, even if there is some kind of rapprochement or some kind of calming down of global wholesale gas prices, food prices inflation is baked in because farmers are making decisions, given the cost of fertiliser, about what they're sowing, because we have seen drought across large parts of the UK. As an arable farmer, as well as a beef farmer, Mark, just tell us about some of the decisions that you and farming colleagues have made about the crops you're sowing, about the fertiliser you're using in the light of your own spiralling costs.
Well, currently one of the main issues we're having on the arable side of things is trying to cultivate ground. Because it's been so dry, ground has been very hard, and it's very difficult to get the ground turned around and in a condition to plant. That will affect whether or not we plant, say, winter barley or winter wheat, and then it might be left till the spring to sow spring barley or spring wheat. But again, because you don't know what the weather's going to do, it makes it quite difficult. Also, you have issues with where you're drying grain and stuff like that. You have the cost of energy. There's high electricity input and high fuel input. So people are looking at what they do in terms of producing their own electricity, being more self-sufficient, using stuff like solar, wind, hydroelectric where possible, setting up their own small setups for producing their own self-sufficient electricity. In terms of beef, it's very difficult at the moment because it's been so dry. Farmers are struggling with food stocks because there's no grass growing. So some are being forced to sell cattle when they wouldn't really want to. So they're kind of diminished on stock for the coming season based on what food they have available.
And how would you describe, Mark, the harvest this year, given that there has been very low rainfall and a lot of regions of the UK declaring drought?
The harvest itself was quite early because of the dry weather. The winter crops were averagely good. The spring crops weren't very good at all because in the later stages of their development, it was just too dry and they kind of died off more than ripened. So the yields weren't as good on the spring crops. In terms of cost, it took less time than normal, but because of the high temperatures, there's been big issues with combines catching fire. So people haven't been able to go combining in the middle of the day. So that's also altered things as well. So it's been quite a bad year for that.
And then on top of that, Justin, of course, we've had two of the world's biggest grain suppliers effectively knocked out of the market, certainly for Western European purposes, both Russia and Ukraine. And those shortages of Ukrainian grain in particular, between the two of them, they produce like a third of the world's grain exports.
Quite astonishing, yeah.
That's also impacted on North Africa and so on.
And that's what I think one of the big issues. We look at inflation. Actually, when you look at some of the geopolitical issues here, you look at some of the weakest areas of the world. If they cannot feed their people...
The most terrorist-prone, with all respect.
Exactly.
What history shows.
And that's when you then suddenly find in come the bad guys again. And so whether it's East Africa, whether it's North Africa, or we're actually dealing in Yemen, we can find ourselves repeating some of these things again. So, and this is not just a European issue, this is a global issue. When you look at those hideous floods in Pakistan, the amount that's going to have to go in to try and support those people, and of course, their land has been destroyed, so they can't even actually grow a crop next year. Well, so it looks like anyway.
We said it a while back, didn't we, Justin? This, obviously, media focuses on the fuel price impacts of this Russia-Ukraine conflict. But it's the food price impacts that are likely to linger the longest.
You said this last year. And by the way, happy birthday, isn't it? On the money.
On the money on Monday. It will be 1 year old, indeed. This is On the Money with Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll keep this discussion going with my panel. So stay with us for discussion of the impact of rising food prices and what you can do to save money when you go shopping. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. It's 1:23. You're On the Money here on GB News TV and DAB plus digital radio and online. We're discussing food price rises after a survey by the British Retail Consortium showed food inflation was up over 10% during the year to August. Let's hear from Mark Summers again. He's a beef and arable farmer in Buckinghamshire. Mark, you were saying it wasn't a great harvest. You were saying that drought has impacted output. I guess when people are shopping, they've got to find cheaper ways to shop, haven't they? Processed food is obviously more expensive. Takeaway food is obviously more expensive. But certainly when I go shopping, I do see quite a lot of bargains in terms of fresh vegetables.
Well, yeah, a lot of your bargains on the fresh vegetables, they're mostly imported. The level of I'm not sure on the numbers, but a lot of our food is imported when we really should be more self-sufficient in trying to produce our own food. But the incentives aren't there for farmers. Like farmers here have to meet regulations in terms of, you know, pesticides and things like that, which is fine. But that, as a result, puts the cost of production of food up. And then they just buy in stuff like oilseed rape, for instance, is bought in from places like Romania, where there's less regulation on the pesticides that they can use. So it's not a level playing field. And really what they should be doing is trying to help out the farmers here and make it easier and an incentive to produce the food rather than trying to go elsewhere.
That's interesting. Vicky Price, how do you think this food price spike, and I think we all agree, unfortunately, there's a bigger food price spike to come. How will this impact, do you think, government policy? We just heard from Mark there that farmers do need more incentives to produce more food to enhance our food security. How do you think policy is going to change? And is there anything that the government can do, in your view, to help keep a lid on this food price inflation?
Well, it's really interesting. We've just been discussing what happens in terms of importing food. But the reality is we export about 60% of everything we produce. So if you look at sort of food manufacturing, I mean, so much of what is sort of processed and turned into something that you can eat here in the UK goes abroad, particularly in the EU. So that's a major sort of export earning. Also, we import about 50% of our food. So we export things perhaps the people here don't like very much or don't want, and we import other stuff. So yes, perhaps we can look at being more self-sufficient and rethink a little bit that mix. But it is also quite extraordinary when you look at some of the things that we were discussing before about the concerns whether we're going to be seeing enough of those products in the future. We are self-sufficient more or less in wheat. And yet we have been paying very much the very high global price for wheat. So if we're able to decouple those prices, a little bit like what we are perhaps going to be able to do in the energy sector, decoupling gas from electricity, and also taking much more account of what we produce locally, whether it's gas or whether it's renewables, which then go into the electricity system. Maybe we can do something similar with food so that we can allocate particular bits of the wheat that's produced, if you like, just for the UK, and look at the price of that in a more normal way, look at the cost of producing it rather than what it fetches internationally. But the one glimmer of hope is that some of those prices have been coming down. And if you look at the last few months, partly because of the agreements with Ukraine to allow some of that grain to start leaving their ports, we've been seeing food prices globally coming down, and coming down actually quite substantially for a number of months. And let's hope that remains the case.
Interesting, isn't it, Justin? You got Mark Summers there, a beef and arable farmer, and Vicky Price, a very distinguished economist, both agreeing that there's going to be a lot more focus, hopefully, on local production, on food security, on decoupling, an important word that Vicky used. Yep. But for now, we are still quite exposed to global markets. That means as the pound weakens, stuff gets more expensive. The pound now well below $1.20, $1.16 it's trading at. Is that going to continue?
At the moment, the sterling is not regarded as a place you want to invest. You only have to look at the gilts market over the past, which you discussed last week.
Which we discussed, yeah.
And suddenly, people want to invest in the UK debt market? No, they don't. And so actually, we're looking a bit like the pariah at the moment. So watch for sterling probably to get weaker. There is one bit of good news. The forward futures for a lot of commodity prices next year would appear to be dropping quite quickly.
And Vicky just referred to that. The price on forward markets, on futures market, the market's predicting that those high wholesale food prices are going to actually start coming down.
And as Vicky said, if you've got the decoupling issue, if you could achieve that, then actually you can try and insulate yourself from some of these global issues. But easier said than done.
Hopefully some light at the end of the tunnel. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, thank you for being with us. Indeed, Vicky Price, Chief Economist at the Centre for Economic and Business Research, and Mark Summers, Buckinghamshire's finest beef and arable farmer. Great to have you all with us discussing this important topic. Now, Royal Mail workers are on strike today with around 115,000 staff walking out in a row over pay. The strikes will disrupt the delivery of packages and letters, but post office branches will remain open. And further strikes are planned by Royal Mail workers in September. Now, our North West reporter, Sophie Reaper, is live from Warrington. Sophie, 115,000 workers, that's a big old strike.
It is indeed, and today is the second of only 4 planned strike days for the Royal Mail. The first was last Friday, now we have today, and then there are a further 2 scheduled for the 8th and 9th of September. Of course, Royal Mail have already issued an apology for any inconvenience this is going to be causing. They've said Royal Mail has well-developed contingency plans, but they cannot fully replace the daily efforts of its frontline workforce. we'll be doing what we can to keep services running, but customers should expect significant disruption. Now, as you said, there's around 115,000 workers striking up and down the UK today, and that was the decision of the workers themselves. In fact, it was a 97.6 majority who voted for strike action. A little bit earlier, I asked the Union General Secretary, Dave Ward, why it is that staff have chosen to strike.
Brought the whole of our union together today. It's all the same issues in terms of fighting for higher pay. In terms of Royal Mail, our members are completely disgusted with the hypocrisy, the greed that they're seeing from the leadership of the company. They've lost complete confidence in the leadership of the company, and that's because the company posted profits just back in April of £758 million. They gave away, those postal workers made those profits, but they decided to give away over £400 million to shareholders. Most of that money goes out of the UK. And then at the same time as the CEO and the chief financial officer of the company were receiving £1 million bonuses for hitting all of their financial targets, they chose to impose, not negotiate, a 2% increase on postal workers. So that's why our members have voted in such massive numbers. I mean, this was on a 77% turnout. These are record-breaking strike numbers. And I think it reflects the fact that there was a time when postal workers were proud to work for Royal Mail, but they feel that the people at the top of this company are running the company into the ground.
Well, that's one side of the story, but Royal Mail CEO Simon Thompson says something different. He says since the Royal Mail privatised, they've paid out £4.8 billion in pay rises. He also says the reality is Royal Mail loses up to £1 million every day as they try to modernise in order to keep up with their competitors. Now, so far, workers have been offered a 2% pay rise, which would be backdated to April, as well as a 3.5% increase in equivalent benefits. But the union argue that staff should be getting a pay rise in line with inflation rising. However, they also say that this is as a result of how they have been treated throughout the pandemic.
Sophie Reaper, GB News Northwest correspondent, reporting from Warrington in Cheshire from the Royal Mail Communication Workers Union picket line in the midst of this strike action. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview is with Chris Jowsey. He's Chief Executive of Admiral Taverns pub chain. He'll be telling us why and how the government should be doing more to save our struggling, beloved local boozers as their energy costs spiral. That's off the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good morning, it is 1:33. Good afternoon, it's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, the Queen will break from royal tradition next week by not returning to London to meet Boris Johnson and the newly elected Prime Minister. Buckingham Palace says Mr Johnson will instead travel to Balmoral Estate in Aberdeenshire for his final meeting with the Queen as head of the Conservative Party. The announcement comes in the final few days of campaigning to replace him, between, of course, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak for the post in number 10. Boris Johnson is warning the Kremlin is intent on undoing the good of Mikhail Gorbachev as he paid tribute to the former Soviet leader. US President Joe Biden is among a number of world leaders who've praised Mr Gorbachev's legacy following his death at the age of 91. He's widely recognised for his role in bringing an end to the Cold War. Today, Mr Johnson accused Vladimir Putin of attempting to recreate the Soviet Union.
Mikhail Gorbachev is one of those people who triggered a series of changes that perhaps he didn't anticipate. Maybe he paid his own political price for it. But when history is written, he will be, I think, one of the authors of fantastic change for the better in the world. And what I worry about today is that the current leadership in Moscow is intent on undoing the good that Mikhail Gorbachev did.
The government has set out plans to sell £1.5 billion worth of its offices as part of a new property strategy. The aim is to move public sector workers into fewer buildings over the next 3 years. The Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg says Whitehall's cutting public costs so the money can be returned to the taxpayer. A team of inspectors from the UN's nuclear watchdog have arrived at the Russian-occupied town Zaporizhzhia power plant. The International Atomic Energy Agency are going to inspect the plant for damage after weeks of shelling nearby raised fears of a radiation accident. The team say they're hoping to stabilise the situation. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.162 and €1.162. The price of gold currently stands at £1,474.73 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, you're on the money. Now, the Co-op has said it will sell its 129-strong petrol forecourt business to Asda in a deal worth £600 million. Representing 5% of its retail estates, Co-op says the proceeds will contribute to grocery store expansion and to help the company balance its books. Meanwhile, petrol prices remain high, even though oil prices have fallen around 20% over recent months. Despite that, though, motoring holidays have turned out to be pretty popular this summer, with many Brits, deterred by reports of air travel chaos, opting for staycations. Well, joining me now to discuss this trend, we have Xavier Collins. He's UK Vice President of the car rental platform Turo, and I can't get rid of him. Justin Urquhart-Stewart is still with us. Xavier, great to see you. Now, your company, Turo, it's like kind of Airbnb for cars. So unlike traditional car rental companies, you don't have fleets and fleets of cars. You help people to rent out their own cars to members of the public, cars that you guys have vetted and so on. It's an interesting model.
Exactly, yeah. No, thanks so much. Basically like Airbnb for cars. So if you're a car owner, it's a great way of basically sharing out your vehicle when you're not using it and making money. And if you're a guest, the idea is that you should be able to find a car 5-minute walk away.
Yeah.
That's well priced.
And a range of cars, be it a small car or a truck or a van or something like that.
Yeah, that's the idea. So, yeah, if you think about it, we don't own fleets and fleets of vehicles. We're actually just leveraging the cars that already exist there today. So there's 37 million in the UK at the moment, and they actually sit idle 95% of the time. And so what that means is we can get a much better selection of vehicles than a traditional car rental or a zip car, something like that, and ideally put them close to people and well priced. And I guess importantly, for this show and the people listening, putting money back in people's pockets.
Yeah, sure. And there are environmental benefits too. I think we use our cars on average. Of course, some people are professional drivers, but we use our cars on average something like 5% of the time. So for 95% of the time, one of the most costly things you'll ever buy is just sitting there depreciating in value, right? So you might as well get some money out of it.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's been a massive driver of adoption this year, this summer in particular. We see a lot of people listing their car. The average earnings now on the platform for a host is about £400 a month.
Wow.
So,
that's proper money.
It's awesome, yeah. And I think the idea is that, during the week or maybe some weekends, you're not using your car. And so if you can share it out on this platform in a trusted, easy way, and you can make money doing so, it's kind of a no-brainer for a lot of people who are trying to, offset the cost of living crisis we're having right now.
And can you use your app to actually open the car door and all of that? I mean, so you have to sort of fit out cars that are going to be hired out on your platform, right? A little bit.
So we actually offer both.
Yeah.
So I'd say the majority of trips on the platform are actually facilitated just through human interaction.
Yeah. So there's a physical key handover.
But there is a significant segment of cars that actually have unlock technology on it. So you can use the Turo app as a guest, search cars. You can even filter by cars that you can unlock automatically.
Yeah.
Find a car near you.
And that's more convenient for both parties, isn't it? Because the person can literally be on holiday and their car can be rented out from their own driveway or the street where they live, and they're making money while they're away.
That's it. So our CEO Andre has this vision that making money on Turo should be as easy as pushing a button and you can make money. And so the idea is that as a car owner, if you have Turo technology installed in your car, as you say, you can be visiting friends on holiday or whatever it is, and you could still be making that asset work for you.
And so have you seen this summer an uptick in people staying in the UK, sort of driving holidays? Obviously, an astonishing place to visit, the UK, right? That's why we're one of the most visited countries in the world.
Yeah.
People who live here don't always see their own country, do they? But you think there's been an uptick in that with people renting out cars to go on a touring holiday to visit parts of the country they don't already know?
Yeah, there definitely has. It's been super interesting. We think that obviously during the pandemic and the months kind of following, people were opting, if they were taking a break, to stay at home. They didn't want to travel. I think what's really interesting is that it's a trend that seems to be continuing. So I think that's probably being driven by two things. One is that people got a taste for, actually it's an amazing country. There's some fantastic places to go. It's much more cost efficient. And then secondly, we've seen a huge amount of kind of chaos at airports this summer. There's still a lot of anxiety around travel. And so...
Pandemic and non-pandemic.
Exactly, like logistical and pandemic. So that's been a massive boon for us, I think. And then on the Turo side of things, we've seen car rental prices, traditional car rental prices have surged. I think they've increased 190% this year. And so... that's to do with the chip shortage and supply constraint issues that you were just talking
lack of silicon chips for cars. It costs more for the traditional car rental companies to buy those fleet of vehicles, doesn't it? Because the cars themselves have become more expensive because of the supply chain issues.
Exactly. And so then if you've got this model where you're relying on scaling up and down a fleet of cars, and when there's already so many cars in the world today, I think that's been all of these kind of trends have combined where we're seeing more people stay in the UK, more people opting for kind of domestic road trips. And then from a Turo perspective, we've been able to offer just much better value for money because we're, literally leveraging the fact that there's someone a 5-minute walk away from you who would like to share out their car and they're not using it. And so you can get a better value and, get a break at a holiday.
And Turo and companies similar to you kind of deal with the insurance. You have a kind of bulk insurance product, right?
It's a great question.
To make it all work. I know, because I've talked to various people about precisely this model, and the thing you really got to crack is the insurance.
Exactly.
But obviously, you're here on live television talking about it. You've largely solved that issue for now.
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's probably the question
I
get asked the whole time. So Turo's lucky in that we've been around now for 10 years. You know, we've raised over $500 million of funding. We've been in the UK for 4 years now. And so it's been a long journey and a difficult journey, but we've learned a huge amount. And I think the insurance nut has been something that we finally cracked. And so, you know, it's critical for anyone listing a car on Turo that they have peace of mind. And equally, if you're a guest booking a car, right?
Sure.
So, you know, anyone who lists a car on Turo, any person who takes a trip on Turo, from the second the trip starts to when the trip ends, it's fully covered by our insurance.
Very interesting. We're going to see a lot of this, aren't we, Justin? We're sort of combining various different themes in this discussion. But as summer comes to an end, September tomorrow.
Yep.
The season.
I've found a use now for my 1963 Morris Traveller, for someone who wants to travel around Britain very slowly.
I mean, when we were kids in the 70s, people did go on holiday more in the UK. They went camping and to the seaside and so on. I think we've already seen it this summer, as Xavier just told us. I think we're going to see more of this, aren't we? People maybe not going on the package tour, not going on the half-term holiday abroad, but just staying at home.
No, everything from cost just to, as Xavier was saying, you know, that annoyance, that fear of going to airports now, because there are queues and it's not a satisfactory mechanism. Also now, I think in London, frankly, you've got to start moving bonkers to own a car in London. You don't need to. Now, we've got lots and lots of public transport, and when you need to have a car, there's a system for doing so. I want one, I can just click my hands and it's going to come to me, and that'll be there.
What do you make of the fact that, you know, you follow the oil price closely? We were up over $120 in June. We're now below $100, but it's bobbing around. We haven't seen that sort of 15, 20% fall in retail prices, though, when we fill up our cars and vans on the forecourt, have we?
It's amazing. It goes like a rocket, doesn't it? It comes down like a feather. And no, we haven't, and it's going to take some time, I suspect, to actually try and do so. But again, like as we were talking earlier about other commodities, we are at last beginning to see these commodity prices starting to come down, and it will work its way through. The good news is, actually, there's a lot of competition on the forecourts, and the people at ASDO, just taken over those co-ops sites, have been very good at actually fighting at, and actually, so I think there's going to be more discount of the petrol as we go through.
Tell us about the future, Xavier Collins, for your company. I mean, how big could this be? I mean, you're not the only one in this space, but you're one of the more prominent. We interviewed a guy called Andy Hibbert from CarShare here on, I should say, in fairness, here on The Money, pretty much this time last year when the show was just getting on the road, so to speak. You see what I did there? Are you guys going to take out the Hertzes, the dollars in America, the big car rental companies? Because in the end, you don't have on your balance sheet all those really expensive cars that even car rental cars sit there for a lot of the time, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, look, obviously traditional car rental is a massive industry and entrenched and been around for a long time. But I'd say that, you know, it's a really exciting time to work at Turo. I think the future is super bright. The reason I believe that is that, you know, it's a marketplace business. And so we're only in the US, Canada, France, UK and Australia soon.
There's time to,
I think
lots of places to expand.
And I think as we launch each international market, as each individual market grows, the power of the marketplace kind of exponentially increases.
And the weirdness of the idea disappears, right? Just as it did for Airbnb.
Exactly. I think I sometimes do talks and I ask the room who here would give their car keys to a stranger. And it's, you know, a couple of people put their hands up at the beginning. And then I think once you start to reframe the idea and explain that actually you can do so risk-free and the economics of it, by the end of the talk, you know, it's closer to 70, 80%.
Interesting.
So that makes me think that there's a huge opportunity here. It hopefully is the future.
Xavier Collins, very interesting to talk to you. You are from Turo. All the best.
Thanks so much.
Time now for my latest daily interview series, Money Talks, and I'm joined by Chris Jowsey. He's Chief Executive of the Admiral Taverns pub chain, which runs around 1,600 boozers across the UK. Now, if you watched On The Money yesterday, and I'm sure you did, why weren't you? You'll be aware that our beloved British pubs are struggling. We've lost almost 20% of them over the last decade, not least during the last couple of years of lockdown, and with more and more locals now facing spiralling utility bills. No energy price cap for businesses, as we so often point out here on The Money. Chris Jowsey, though, is among those pub industry leaders declaring enough is enough. He put his name to an open letter to the government and the Prime Ministerial candidates calling for more support to save our small firms and pubs in particular. So here he is, Chris Jowsey, Chief Executive of Admiral Taverns, my latest guest on Money Talks. Chris, great to have you on the show. You put your name to that letter. A lot of pub industry bosses are warning that a lot of our beloved locals are really under pressure now. How bad is it?
It's actually really bad. The situation is perhaps not as apparent to most consumers currently, but it's becoming really, really difficult. As more and more pubs have their contracts for utilities renewed, they're finding incredible cost increases. And the issue is, unfortunately, unless something's done about it, and unless we can work together with the government to resolve this, then there's going to be sort of serious, irreversible damage potentially to many licensees, to their communities and the pubs that support them. So it's absolutely vital that we get a small business energy price cap just as soon as we possibly can, at least to get people through the winter.
Chris, with some honourable, I'm astonished how little comment there's been from our political and media class over recent weeks and months that this off-gen price cap does not apply to firms. You know, I've been getting emails for weeks from pubs, from retailers, from restaurants showing me the quotations for their energy bills are up 4, 5, 6-fold on this time last year.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I don't really understand what the challenge is in making some progress in terms of policy, because I personally raised this issue with ministers over 6 months ago, but the government has clearly failed to act. It seems to have had its eye in other places. So it's becoming incredibly frustrating. And I guess the future is so uncertain in terms of utility costs that many licensees now are beginning to, well, I suppose the overwhelming emotion is one of fear, because they just don't know how they're going to get through those winter months when obviously energy usage is much greater than it has been over a lovely summer. If I can give you one example, one of our licensees wrote to me last week. He's been in a pub for over 20 years. He loves the pub. He's very reluctantly had to give notice because he received a new quote for his electricity and it had gone up by 450%. And unfortunately, a recent survey by the British Institute of Innkeeping has suggested that 2 out of every 3 of their members are seeing increases now over 300%. And it's actually escalating. It's getting worse throughout August. So I think this problem has been coming for some time. I think we've tried to highlight it. We've tried to work with people. But frankly, we're just not getting the attention it needs. And it's not just pubs. This will apply to every small business on the high street and elsewhere. And if there's no intervention soon, then most of those high streets are going to be decimated over winter.
We've lost about 20% of our pubs since 2012. Chris, pubs are often, the heart of a high street, the heart of a rural community. They're community centres. They're places where people learn to live with each other, keep an eye on each other, where a lot of older people go, otherwise lonely. What do we lose when we lose those pubs?
Well, I think we lose a tremendous amount, and we saw that during the pandemic, didn't we? I mean, fortunately, government and the pub companies and everybody else came together. I mean, pub companies alone over the pandemic invested over £360 million to make sure those pubs could reopen once the lockdowns had closed, because everybody recognises the huge benefit they provide to their local communities. I mean, if you do any sort of pub visits, or if you do any research, which many people have done now, you find that they are fantastic places for overcoming things like loneliness and depression. As you said, a lot of older people actually live or spend many of their hours in that pub meeting other people, because it's often their only opportunity to talk to others. And don't forget as well, most pubs raise many thousands of pounds for their local community charities. So in total, the sector raises over 100 million every year for charities. And if you have a sports team, or if you have a local interest group, quite often your place of meeting is in the local pub, and so it should be. And the pub is obviously very happy to welcome those people in and to give them some facilities, potentially some food and drink, etc., etc., just to encourage that social cohesion. And I think you saw how strongly community pubs bounced back after the lockdown. People were desperate to get back to the pub and meet their neighbours and their friends again. And it's been really strong ever since. So it would be awful if we now lose so many of them to a cost of living crisis, which could be tackled.
Chris Jowsey, CEO of Admiral Taverns, good to talk to you. It's a difficult message. We will stay in touch in the weeks and months ahead here on The Money. Justin, the government's going to have to do something to help small firms.
This is the most important issue facing our economy. It's the largest employer of small companies. We're very good at small companies. And it's not just pubs, as Chris said, but broader than that. And it's not a matter of saying some may go bust. A lot of them will go bust, and all those jobs.
Time for a couple of quick emails on strikes. That Royal Mail strike with 115,000 workers. Kenny says the post workers can stay on strike because in my postcode I don't see a postman from Monday to Thursday. So they may as well be on strike anyway. They're not needed anymore to the same degree as before. And on food prices, John got in touch to say, I've been shopping at Aldi and Lidl for over 20 years. They open shops continuously in the UK. Despite their low prices, the discounters still make a profit. They wouldn't be able to grow if they ran at a loss. All the other major supermarkets have been taking the public for a ride for years. Thanks for your emails, as always. All we got time for today, but join me tomorrow at 1 p.m. while I'll be helping you to beat the squeeze. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello, I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine, bright day out there for most today. Sunny spells, a bit breezy across the south. Most places are dry, but there are just one or two showers around. High pressure is dominating, but around this area of high pressure, the breeze is coming in from the North Sea. So it's pretty fresh on some of those North Sea coasts. The isobars closer together across the south, so quite a brisk breeze blowing along the south coast as well. And that breeze is bringing in a bit more cloud across eastern England. There are one or two showers over northeast England. It could drift into southwest Scotland this afternoon, and maybe one or two more for Lincolnshire down towards Nottinghamshire. But for the vast majority, it's dry. Many seeing lengthy spells of sunshine. Feeling quite warm in that sunshine. The Midlands down to South Wales, 22 to 24 or 25. A little cooler across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And certainly it does feel fresh on those North Sea coasts south of Lincolnshire. As we go through the night, not a great deal of change. Any showers will fade away pretty quickly this evening, so it's dry nights with clear spells. Temperatures holding up in the teens in southernmost parts of England, but elsewhere quite a cool night, certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures well down into single figures in rural areas. A chilly start then here, but generally a sunny start to Thursday. Very similar day, actually. The breeze perhaps a little lighter in the east, but again, one or two showers are possible over northeast England, but few and far between. For most places, it's going to be dry. The main exception will be across the Channel.